can share this. It's always lovely to meet other early career members, and it's great to take part in BEAT-PCD. My colleagues in Dundee are always telling me that Silly is the most exciting part of science, so it's lovely to join you all today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about giving a guide to poster preparation and presenting for both virtual and in-person conferences. And I thought we could really start with talking about what is the role of a poster session. Poster sessions are so much more than just putting your research on a wall and letting people walk past it. It's a forum to discuss and engage with other researchers. And poster sessions really offer a unique opportunity to present your work in an interactive format, really start discussions. And the key to a good poster session is to really engage with your viewers, start those discussions, get talking to people. It's a great opportunity to learn and collaborate with other researchers in your field. So over the course of this session today, I'll give a little introduction about myself, though I think Katie's very nicely summarized it. And then we're going to talk about where you're presenting, how to start your poster design, how to make the most of your poster space, and then finally, I'll give a few guidelines on presenting your poster both virtually and in person. So a little bit about me. I graduated in 2016 with a degree in biological sciences from the University of Dundee before I joined the Chalmers Lab in 2016. I started as a research technician before moving on to doing a PhD, and now I work as a translational scientist studying neutrophil extracellular trap formation in the microbiome in both bronchiectasis and COPD. I'm currently in the final stages of thesis write-up, and I'm really hoping to submit this autumn. I've had previous experience presenting posters at both national and international meetings, such as the ERS, the ATS, and the WBC. And I've also chaired poster sessions at the ERS 2019 and the BTS 2019. So you've been invited to give a poster, and this is very exciting. The first thing you want to think about is, where are you presenting and what conference are you going to be attending? Is it going to be in person, or is it going to be a virtual format? And this is going to make a big difference, the kind of poster that you want to design and the kind of talk you're going to give. Does the conference come with guidelines on poster format? Do they provide you with a size? Do they tell you what kind of poster they're after? Should it be landscape or portrait? Are there guidelines on the session structure? If it's in person, it's likely that you'll put your poster up on a board and you'll maybe stand with it or walk around with the chairs. But if it's virtual these days, there tends to be lots of different structures. So it's really important to check in and see what the kind of conference you're attending. Is it going to be a live poster? Is there going to be a virtual poster hall and you're going to need a voice recording? Are you going to need a video? Will you need to make summary slides? Carefully check all the details that the conference gives you and make sure that you're fully prepared for your session. Being prepared will make it much more relaxing and it'll make a smooth session. So where to start? You're ready to make your poster. An easy place to start is, do you have access to a template? A number of institutions already provide templates with you. I've got an example there of a template that the University of Dundee provide to us, and this is a good place to start. Additionally, some conferences may also provide templates that they wish you to use. So again, check those conference guidelines. Do you have to use their poster, or can you use your own? If you don't have a template, don't worry. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to cover some of the guidelines on poster design. So the first thing to start out is, what size of poster do you need and what should it look like? Should it be portrait or landscape? It's really important to check this. You do not want to turn up to your conference with a landscape poster that has to fit onto a portrait board and you're trying to squeeze it on there. So really check this to start with. Typically, conference posters are A1 in size, and I've included the measurements on this slide. I'd really recommend using PowerPoint to make your posters. It's very accessible, most people do have access to it, and it's very straightforward to use. If you're unfamiliar with how to set your poster size, you can go into the design box and then into slide size and custom slide size. This will allow you to put in the measurements you need and also say whether you want the poster to be portrait or landscape. So now you have this big, large A1 sheet of paper, and this can be a little bit daunting. I'd really recommend, first of all, filling in your main headings. So this would be your title, authors, introduction, methods, results, conclusion, and discussion, and separate these into boxes. You don't need to worry too much at this stage about formatting. It's just to make sure that you're going to remember to include all the information you need on your poster. Remember to leave margins around each of the boxes and especially around the edge of the poster. Whether you're printing or you're uploading to a virtual format, there's always a risk that the edges of your poster might get trimmed. So you don't want to put any text there or any figures that are going to get cut off and you're going to lose that detail. Also, aesthetically, your poster is going to be a lot more pleasing to look at with little borders around it. So I'd really recommend leaving margins in. Keep the audience in mind at every stage of this. Is this going to be in person or is it going to be virtual? If it's in person, it's going to be probably blown up to A1 size. So you might be able to get a little bit more detail on there. If it's virtual, remember that some viewers will only be looking at it on one screen. So you do need to make sure the poster is readable from that distance. How you want to lay your poster out is entirely up to you. There's loads of different example layouts online. You can look on Google. There's a number of different websites that also offer free poster templates. So you can really have fun here and be quite creative. What's really important is you're not just presenting data, but you really want to tell a story and you want to take your viewer through the data you want to tell them about. So make sure you think about the flow and the layout of your poster and make it nice and clear for the viewer in the chairs to really see what's going on. I thought I'd include a little guide to font size because if you are starting from scratch, choosing your fonts can be a little daunting and a little confusing when your poster is being blown up to A1. Choosing the right font size is key to a good poster. It's going to make your poster accessible and legible. It's going to help to improve that poster flow and tell the story. And it's going to help the viewer in the chairs to find the key pieces of information that they need. It goes without saying, and yet it does need to be said, do use an easy to read font. Fun fonts are exciting and interesting, but they might not print well, they might not be easy to read. So really do try and stick to your classics, your Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, things that are going to make it accessible to all your audiences. I've included a little rough guide here of font sizes if you really are starting from scratch. These aren't set in stone, you don't need to definitely follow them, but they're a nice little guide to help you get started. So I'd recommend a title that's 70 to 80 points, headings that are roughly 55 points. For your main text, try and keep it a minimum of 32 point if you're blowing it up to A1 size. And for your figure legends, try and keep it to a minimum of 26 point, just to make sure that everything will be legible and people won't have to get millimeters away from your poster to read it. So now you've put your boxes in and you're ready to start filling in your poster. You've made your basic layout, you're really ready to get going. This is the stage where I'd really recommend try to add all your text, your headings, your figures, your graphs in one go here. Try and get everything you need on your poster and don't worry too much about the formatting. It's much, much, much easier to format once you know exactly what you want to include and you've got everything there. And it's also going to tell you what you can take out. It's important not to overload your poster. I know you might be really excited about your data and you're going to have lots of interesting things to put on there, but if you put too much, it's going to make it very difficult to read. So really think about the important bits of data and what you really want to highlight and make the most of these. Again, keep in mind, what kind of session is this? Is it virtual? If it is virtual, do try and keep your poster more simple, especially if you've been used to presenting it in person formats where you've got that big A1 poster. Remember that depending on the format, it really might be a session where it's just a single screen available and people aren't able to zoom, so make sure that everything can be read on one screen. And make sure you're still always thinking about that flow and that you can talk your people through your poster clearly. Color. So we all like to use a little bit of color to brighten up our posters, especially maybe to make them stand out from that sea of navy and white that we see in poster holes. I do think it's nice to try and keep a theme throughout. This makes your poster more aesthetic. And do avoid using colored backgrounds with dark text, as these can be harder to read. Remember that if you're in a virtual format, some viewers might not have the same screen brightness as you. Try and use contrasting colors if you've got graphs that have different data points on them. So, you know, maybe a blue and turquoise will look really lovely on your screen, but on someone else's screen, it could all just look blue. So if you really want to highlight different things, do try and use contrasting colors. But remember to avoid using red and green together. I would also consider putting your introduction or your background and your conclusion headings in a separate color. When somebody comes over to your poster, they're going to get a flavor it early on. And if you can draw their eye to the background and the conclusion, this lets the viewer have a quick glance over, see your important points, and then maybe they can dive into the methods and the results and get a little bit more detail going. I try and keep the background nice and short and succinct. You don't need to waste loads of words here. You just want to briefly introduce what you're doing and where you're going with this. And same with the methods, keep it brief. When you do your explanations, that's when you can really start digging into the detail. So the results, these are really the heart of your poster. This is what you've brought people to see. This is what's really exciting. So you want to really make the most of this section. I'd recommend breaking your results sections up into smaller sections or smaller boxes. Instead of having one massive white square in the middle of your poster with lots of different graphs and texts, this can make it very difficult for the readers to follow. If you section off your graphs and text that match together, it's going to make it much easier for the viewer. Likewise, you might have a lot of complex data, and figures can be really used to illustrate this nicely without having to be too wordy. You can add these descriptions in when you're talking. Use figure legends, but do remember to keep the font size legible. It can be tempting to squeeze them in tiny text, but if they're not readable, people aren't going to understand the graphs. When you're thinking about putting your graphs in, again, it's the same kind of idea. Your data might be really exciting, but try not to squeeze too much of it in. Try to showcase the most important data. If you put too many tiny graphs on, you're going to lose the detail in the axis legends, especially when you blow the posters up and they're going to be unreadable. Any smaller points can be discussed in person and in your summary. As I said before, think about those colors. Use bright, contrasting colors for separate data points to really highlight what you're talking about. This can also be really useful when you're describing the data. If you color groups differently, for example, when you're talking through the poster, you can talk about the different colors, and this is going to really help the chair and the viewers to follow what you're talking about. At the end of each section, do remember to briefly summarize your findings. This is going to help improve flow and nicely lead your viewers into the next section. This is an example of a poster I gave a few years ago. So this was in person, so it's a little bit busier, but you can see that I've split the results into 4 sections, and then each section has a little figurehead and a little heading to explain what the section's about. This will hopefully help the viewer follow through the sections and into the conclusion. Images. So I know we must have a lot of cilia fans in the room, and I'm sure you'll want to include lovely pictures of cilia. So it's really important to make sure that these will still be sharp at A1 size. You don't want to lose all that nice 9-fold symmetry detail. Use high quality images and ensure that the dots appearance are sufficient, e.g. 300 dpi. Avoid stretching your images, or make sure when you size them up evenly. You don't want oddly shaped objects or to make changes to the scale bars. Finally, when you're happy with your images, zoom in and check the pictures or figures at 100 to 200% magnification. If they're sharp at this magnification, then they're going to print well at A1, and you know they're going to look good on your poster. Your final sections are your conclusions and your acknowledgements. For your conclusion and discussion, really do try and keep this brief. You just want to summarize the key points and wrap up what you found. Try to use bullet points or short statements to keep the area nice and clean. Finally, your acknowledgements. Do remember to include any appropriate acknowledgements to funders or support networks in the form of either text or logos, and some funders or networks may specify what they'd like, so keep this in mind. Final checks. So you've got all your text on your poster, all your beautiful figures are in there. Now it's time to make your poster look as good as possible. For this, I always like to make use of the PowerPoint alignment tool, and I've highlighted it here on the right-hand side. If you select the shapes you want to align, this can be your figures, this can be the actual boxes that the text are in. You can select multiple shapes and align them up to each other, align them up to your margins. This is going to make your poster neat and easier to read. For your text, do try to use bullet points and short statements. Avoid putting huge, long sentences across the length of your poster. These are going to be very difficult to read and difficult to follow. Check the font sizes throughout. Are they the same in all the sections? It's amazingly easy to somehow move your text around, make it different sizes, and then when you print it out, you realize everything looks slightly different. It's a little untidy. So just do check that for your main text, your headings, everything matches how you want it to, and check that you've got the same font throughout as well. This is going to make your poster look much neater. When you're happy with your poster, remember to preview it on the full screen. You can press F5 or hit preview for this, and you'll see the whole poster in full. Is it clear? Is it easy to follow? Can you see the story you're telling? Maybe ask a colleague to have a little look and see what they think. Once you're happy, I do recommend converting your PowerPoint to a PDF file before you either upload or you send it for printing. Some virtual conferences might have a file specified they want you to use, so do check this. But if nothing is specified, PDF's really your best bet. This will stop anything moving around or being accidentally deleted. So convert to a PDF and then check your file that last time. Make sure everything's exactly where you want it to be and it's as neat as possible. Next, I thought finally I'd end with a little bit of presenting at both virtual conference sessions and in person. And we'll talk about virtual first because realistically, that's what we're going to be doing this year. Some virtual conferences may offer practice sessions or sound checks. These are usually with a technician. You dial in and maybe they'll talk you through how the session will work, what your role will be, how to upload your slides, things like that. It's really important to try and attend these sessions if you can. It's going to help you to understand what to do on your role. It's really helpful to the session organisers and the chairs to know that you know what's going on, and it's going to let the session run smoothly. It also takes away some of the stress for you, and it'll help you feel more prepared going in. If the session's live, do rehearse a 2 to 3 minute summary of your poster in preparation. I've chaired on a number of occasions, and you can certainly tell when people have prepared their summaries in advance, and it makes such a difference. This is your opportunity to really highlight and showcase your data. Tell the chairs what is exciting. Try to avoid just reading from your poster. You want to make the most of your work. Likewise, if you're providing a voiceover or video recording, do the same. Rehearse before and avoid just reading out what's on your poster. Viewers are going to be able to read this. This is your chance to add extra information. The rules are much the same if you're attending an in-person session. Prepare that 2 to 3 minute summary and don't just read from the poster. This is your opportunity to highlight how exciting your work is. Where possible, do attend your full poster session. Sometimes you might be asked by the chairs to go around the posters as a group, or you might be asked just to stand by your poster. If you are standing by your poster, be approachable, chat to people who come over to view, offer to talk them through your poster, or let them know you're happy to answer any questions. Finally, enjoy your session. Poster presentations are a fantastic opportunity to discuss your work, learn from others, and to network with the other researchers. Make sure that you do join your full sessions and attend any additional discussions or virtual breakout rooms, because this will really help them make the most of your presentation and join in with those discussions. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Holly. That was a very efficient lecture about both virtual and on-site poster and presentation with very practical tips. Now, let's hear what our expert poster reviewer, Erik, has anything to add from his view as a poster reviewer. Erik?
Hi, I'm here. Well, first of all, just that I didn't misunderstand, I didn't have to give a PowerPoint presentation, or did I?
No.
Because I just have to give feedback based on my experience in both the sessions so far. Well, okay, then I have a couple of views. I think it was a lovely presentation highlighting many important aspects about poster presentations, and especially some of the pitfalls. And I think the first thing is you should have a clear message. And I mean, with a clear message, you shouldn't have a lot of text on your poster, because people won't see the message you're trying to give. When you visit a conference and you look at the different posters, and wait a minute, oh, sorry, my image is, well, okay, it's back again. When you try to get a message from a poster and there's a lot of text on it, then it can be quite difficult to get your message across to the viewers. So in general, I try to keep the main message, so your discussion, your conclusion, on eye height. So don't stick it away on the bottom. Of course, there are many ways you can do it. It's just something which I like to do. Just put it in a clear sight, and use a font type which is easy readable, also from some distance. And I think many researchers, especially when you're doing basic research, they tend to put a lot of details in the poster which are not absolutely necessary. So that's, I think, the most important message I would like to give. Then second, what I would like to say is that's less important. In the past, I've made many posters, and then I had put a lot of effort in it, and I put a poster on the board, and it was very specialized, and then I got one visitor. I mean, don't be disappointed if you get a few people. Nowadays, fortunately, the poster sessions are often accompanied by a poster discussion, in which the presenters are visited at each poster, and then you can give a short presentation. But sometimes it's just you have to put your poster there, and especially when you work in a small area in research, especially in basic research, sometimes you get few views. On the other hand, when you do a lot of clinical stuff in most conferences, you will get a lot of views, especially in the ERS. But don't be disappointed by it, because it's a very educational experience to put your data in a poster. It learns you to concentrate your data and to get a clear message, which also helps you when you're writing the manuscript. And then finally, I think, but nowadays most poster sessions are poster discussion sessions, and I really like them. I like them a lot better even than the normal sessions, because you can get very in-depth discussions. But when you have a poster discussion session, please make sure you have a good presentation ready, so you can summarize your data and your presentation in just a couple of minutes. Because after the session, you always get a lot of colleagues who are working in the same area, asking you questions, and you can ask them a lot of questions, especially when you also visit the other poster sessions. For example, how did they do this technique? How did they were able to get specific results using specific techniques, and what you encounter? So it can be a very, very helpful experience to have these poster discussion sessions. Do I have oh yeah, then one small thing. Indeed, what also was emphasized, please check the poster format. Once I did it wrong, and it is really very embarrassing to have the only poster which was not in the landscape but in a straight position. It's not a big problem because you stand out, but it's really it's a bit embarrassing. So please check always all the details before you start making the poster. And again, I cannot emphasize it enough. Don't put too much text or results on your poster, because you won't be able to get your results. You will not be able to get it across the room. It's not a manuscript. It's a poster which should have brief messages which can easily be remembered by the people who are leaving the conference, because after they read your poster, they will only remember one or two things about it, and it's important to get that across. Actually, those are the messages from my perspective.
Brilliant, thank you, Eric. We really appreciate your insight, and it's great to hear a couple of opinions and a couple of different perspectives on posters and presentation. And thank you very much, Holly, for your excellent presentation. I'd like to take this opportunity to open the floor for the Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. If not, you can unmute yourself and ask your own question.
So I have a question, Eric. You said that it's also good to put a conclusion on eye height. So do you mean on the middle of the poster, because it's almost always below, and I could imagine that it makes more sense there, and then maybe make it a little bit bigger and short and catchy instead of putting it in the middle?
No, I didn't mean to put it in the middle of the poster. But just remember, let's just say, don't put it completely at the bottom and a small font. Put it in a place that people can easily see it. And from a logical point of view, of course, you have your introduction, you have your material methods, you have your results, and then you have your conclusions. And it's not wrong to put it at the bottom, but just make sure that it's well readable. And sometimes the layout of a poster makes it possible to put a little bit more above, but it's just a way to get your message more efficiently across. But please don't put it in the middle of the poster and then tell everybody, Eric Harman told me to put it in the middle, and I will be a bit embarrassed.
Well, maybe it works, like really catchy. Well, this is what I've done.
You will be the first one, and then of course people will remember it. That's true.
Any other questions? So I have one for Holly. So how do you feel about interactive posters and the use of QR codes to
So I think oh, sorry, did I cut you off? I think there's such a good idea if you can scan something. I often end up when I'm going around posters myself, I take photos on my iPhone. So it's really great. I personally have never worked out how to make a QR code. It's something I'd really like to do because I think they are such a useful tool. If you can scan something, and it takes, sometimes people include links to their manuscripts, you know, additional information, maybe links to databases. So I think if you can work out how to use the QR code, it's a great tool.
Does anyone have any recommendations for how to create QR codes and share them?
I did it several times. There is tons of QR code. If it's for a link, it's really easy to make. You just go online on any QR code creator, you enter your link, and it will directly download to you like a PNG or PDF version of your QR code that you just have to copy paste. It's really, really simple.
Are these freely accessible as well?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yes, that's what also Miruna just added in the chat box, that it's quite easily to make a QR code if people are interested. I think maybe you can just circulate examples of such QR links. Early career researchers email list. And also what Mathieu wrote in the chat box, for in person, sometimes it is not much more expensive to get a poster printed on textile, which is great folded in your bag. It is much easier to travel than with a tube. And please never think that a couple of A4 paper printed and glued together will work. Well, that's a very excellent idea and suggestion. Yeah, definitely not to to glue together puzzle of poster, and it's good to know that printing on textile is not that expensive. And also what Miruna just added is that you can put your contact details, for example, email, as QR codes so people can contact you afterwards. Yes, for follow-up questions if they have any more ideas, comments for your poster. Yeah, yes, that's a very good idea. I have one question, Holly. You mentioned about font sizes, and I think you referred to them when it's like the A1 format to print out for in-person congresses. Is there any recommendation for e-posters, especially since I guess mostly they just put it in a very small size as an e-poster on the website?
So for your e-posters, I would mostly just recommend almost what you're saying is once you've made your poster up, put it on a full screen view. Can you read it? If it's too small, adjust your font sizes up. And definitely when you're making e-posters, do make them a lot less busy than you would make your normal in-person posters, because people can't get as close. They might not be able to zoom. So you're really going to want to stick to, you know, your key information, your key story, what you really want to get across.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions? To both experts, Holly and Eric, maybe? And maybe one question from me to Eric. Is there, for example, if you could choose any top thing to really remind early career researchers to think to do that it will benefit their posters, one thing to choose, and also one thing to choose to absolutely not do, like absolutely no, just don't do it at all. What would you say?
Well, my most important thing is don't put too much text on it. I mean, white is good, then it looks a lot better. So also, and people just really read it. And a lot of text means people don't read it and they will pass by. If you just have a couple of main messages, people remember it. And that's, I think, the most important. That's not the most important because the discussion, of course, very important, but that's one very important part of the poster, to get your message across. And finally, when you're going to write a real manuscript, you can put all the details in it. And that's, if you visit a poster session in an average conference, you will see that 90% of the posters have a lot of text on it, really too much. And it's from a scientific point of view, of course, very good to put all the details in it and all the test conditions you used. but from the point of view of getting your message across in just a brief time period, which you only often have during a poster session, it's not good. Nobody's going to read the full poster if it is a full manuscript printed on an A1 format. And that's the most important thing I think you should remember. And if there's some, I would always try to do when I made posters is you should have some white on the poster. I mean, parts where there's no text, because then the different sections of your poster, they stand out and people read it. That's the most important message I would like to get across.
Thank you. Now, maybe just a follow-up question to the both of you, since you mentioned having the message delivered is the most important part. If you could choose to have, oh, I created a very fancy, nice graph of my results, but I would also like to really just, like you said, get the message out, have it as a bold center part of your poster, what would you choose? Holly?
Are you meaning when you make a poster with the strip down the middle with your main results? I think that's a really nice way to present data. And certainly, I think figures and graphs are always a really nice, clean way to present data. They're easy to follow, and just putting good figure legends underneath so that they're fully explained. Say if someone sees your poster and then goes back to have another look later, they can still understand what's going on.
Thank you. Erik, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think using the when you can put things graphically, that always works better than text. It catches the attention of people, and it often gets the message across just with one view. So to put a lot of effort in a good graphs, I think that's a very good idea.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Katie, do you have any more questions?
One relating to figures. So I've seen quite a lot of posters where people choose to do their methods in a kind of pictorial form. Would you recommend doing that within PowerPoint itself, or do you have any software recommendations? Or do you even agree with displaying your methods in that way?
So I think using figures for your methods is a really nice way to do it. Pictures always look good. You can make them in PowerPoint. There are programs you can buy that cost. BioRender is a really great one. It is a subscription service though, so it does cost, but it lets you make very beautiful scientific images, especially for things like methods. But you can build things. I used to always build everything in PowerPoint, and it does work. It takes a bit of time, but it does work really well, and you can make some very nice flow diagrams of your methods, which is nicer than having lots of words.
Thank you. And Eric, do you have any opinions on this?
Well, actually, I usually made the graphs in different software, and I just put them in a PowerPoint. I used to use Graph Prism a lot, which is a very user-friendly program. And of course, just Excel, which is very well compatible with the PowerPoint. But GraphPad Prism is a very intuitive program, which also have a lot of statistical modules in it. Unfortunately, my hospital doesn't support it anymore, but you had to buy it. The last time I used it, I had to buy it myself, and it wasn't really cheap. So it's easy if you have it in your hospital.
Thank you. So any other questions from the audience? No?
And just for me to get an idea, the people who are in this meeting, they are all scientists, of course. Do you all already have experience with preparing posters and presenting them? Are there people who are going to do this for the first time? Probably most of you have already done a lot of posters. And if so, is there anybody who disagrees with the things which have been said or agree with the things that what is your experience, all of you? Well, I know Hetty, so I'm going to ask Hetty.
Yeah, so due to Corona, I did not present a poster yet, so I have no experience, but I've seen some posters before, so I know the whole too much text and you're not really going to read it point. So I know that. So I have a little bit idea how I would do it, but I think figures are always better than words.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks, Hetty. And are there also any of the other researchers who have had already some experience with? And do any of you notice new things about what has been told, or is any of the audience who would like to reply to this? Amelia.
Hi, I totally agree with the thing about context. So in my very first poster session that I went to, I practiced my 2-minute talk in my head over and over again that summarized my poster. And then the chair came to my poster and said, so how does your work compare to the person that just presented? Oh, I don't know, because I've been practicing mine in my head. So now I always read the abstracts of the other people who are presenting. And I think that's a nice thing to do as well, because it's usually stuff that's relevant to your own work because of the session that you've been put in. Usually people that are going around the posters will be standing near a poster that's close. So the chances are that if you know their work as well, then that can spark interesting conversations. So I think the context is important from that perspective. But also, I think quite a lot of people can be in a session which is called, primary ciliary dyskinesia advances in care, and they waste the first line of their poster saying primary ciliary dyskinesia is a rare inherited disease. And that's just not necessary, because everybody in that session is going to be talking about PCD. So I think if you know what your session is, you can also, manage to cut out some words from not having to state the obvious. That's my unsolicited advice on posters.
I think that's great advice, especially on context and read your abstracts, certainly in these virtual formats. Having breakout rooms afterwards where the discussions can sometimes be a bit stilted and a bit difficult. If you go to them prepared, you've read the abstracts in your session, maybe you have some questions for other posters in your sessions, that's a really great way to be able to join in the discussion and help keep it moving, which is great.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with you guys. I presented a bunch of posters both in Europe and in the US. I think one thing that is important to know is the type of conference, because I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago about cilia analysis and video analysis, and I presented that both in biophysics conference, like I went to the Biophysical Society meeting, for example, and in conferences that were more medical. And I think I would not present the same poster to those two different type of conference, because if you go to a medical conference like the ERS and you put a couple of equations, people will say, oh my God, it's too hard, I will never understand. And they won't stop at your poster. But on the other side, if you put too much clinical data on a biophysical or a biomechanical engineering meeting, well, people say, well, it's not real science, you know what I mean? And so there is this whole idea of really knowing who you are for and who you are presenting to. And one last bit, and it might be personal, but dress for the occasion. I remember going to Biomedical Engineering Society in the US where a bunch of undergrad are presenting, and you see people in flip-flop and shorts and t-shirts, and their work might be great, but the image you show of yourself doesn't look super professional, and I don't think it's engaging when someone looks there already, ready for the happy hour and going to the beach. So I think it's also important to look somewhat professional, especially in clinical setting where if there's a lot of doctors around, everybody's dressed up in suit, and you arrive and you are the only person in shorts. It's not the way you want to stand out.
I think in general, there are very, very, very few occasions where flip-flops and shorts are indicated. So I think it's a very good point you made. Dress to the occasion.
Yeah, some great points there from Amelia and Matthew. Thank you. Okay, so I don't think there are any more questions in the chat. Correct me if I'm wrong, Yinting.
No more questions, just one input from Nuria. She thinks that 2 minutes presentation of the content of the poster is perfect. Some people use more than 5 minutes to explain the poll results during poster discussion sessions. Yes, I think that goes hand in hand with being precise with the message and not, talk too much verbally and literally. So thank you both experts very much, Holly and Erik. Thank you for lecturing us and also especially giving us very practical tips so we can do better in our posters.